Hello everybody, welcome to the I Am IT Geek YouTube channel. My name is Shabazz and as ever I am the IT Geek. Welcome back. We are here with another SE 100 exam topic series. And SE 100 is the Microsoft Cybersecurity Architect exam. So really it's the sort of top level exam from a security perspective when it comes to Microsoft. Specifically sort of your overall over the IaaS, PaaS and SaaS services. It covers all of them. We're going to start a new topic there, topic 12. So we've got 15 topics in total. So we are coming towards the last couple of weeks hopefully of this course. So it's been a long journey obviously, and I do thank everybody for joining me on it and keeping up. Hopefully it's helped you with your own preparations. So without further ado, let's get started with this episode. So yeah, this is SC100 Microsoft Cybersecurity Architect, and this is topic 12, part 1. And this topic specifically is specify requirements for you sort of securing SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS services. And in today's episode specifically, we're actually going to talk about securing those SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS services, which is essentially the shared responsibility model. And if you've done the SC 900, you will have gone through that already. And then we'll talk about security baselines for cloud services, and then we'll go into a demo. In the demo, I'm actually going to go into Defender for Cloud again and show you some of the other regulatory compliant sort of configurations you can do for the Microsoft security baselines. So let's start with this first topic. Let's talk about securing SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS services, specifically that shared responsibility model. And this is a diagram that you should be quite familiar with. This is that shared responsibility model from Microsoft. For any consumer really who's using Microsoft, you should really know this. And as you can see, we've got on the right hand side in the different colors, we've got SaaS, PaaS, IaaS, and on-prem services, and we've got the comparisons as to in the light sort of turquoisey blue we have what's Microsoft's responsibility to manage, and then the darker blue is the customer responsibility, and we have some services that are responsibility that's 50-50. So we start from the top. So the responsibility is always retained by the customer. So we've got information and data, we've got devices, mobiles and PCs, and accounts and identities. So in all SaaS, PaaS, IaaS, and on-prem services, this is always you as a consumer, you as a customer, your responsibility to manage. So that doesn't change with any of those public cloud or on-premises services. We then start getting into more shared responsibility, or specifically Microsoft takeover as well. So this is responsibility. It varies depending on the type of service. So we talk about identity and directory infrastructure. For SaaS and PaaS, this is actually a joint responsibility, kind of 50-50 between the customer or consumer and Microsoft. But then as we go to IaaS and on premises, this is where it's fully customer or consumer responsibility. And then we go to applications and network controls. For SaaS, this is fully Microsoft's responsibility. But then PaaS, again, is a 50-50 responsibility. Some responsibility on Microsoft and some responsibility on you. And then IaaS and on-premises, again, is fully the customer. I mean, on-premises is always going to be the customer, so we don't really need to mention, to say that's kind of a given. It's you as a consumer or customer is hosting it in your own data center or office location, so that's always going to be your responsibility. Then as we go to operating system, that's where we start to see more of a shift now towards Microsoft responsibility. So with SaaS and PaaS services, that is Microsoft responsibility, but then IaaS, and this is the final bit of responsibility on IaaS, which is customer and consumer responsibility. We then start getting into Microsoft, which is that physical sort of cloud provider, physical location, physical hosting, physical networking. This is all Microsoft's responsibility when it comes to SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS, anything they host. But again, on-premises is going to be you as a consumer. So I definitely recommend you get to understanding, get to grips with this model, and try and memorize it. Really, it's not going to be that difficult to memorize. Okay, let's talk a little bit about security baselines for cloud services now. So let's talk about IaaS security. So this is infrastructure as service, which, as we saw from the shared responsibility model, there's more emphasis on us as a consumer, us as a customer to protect our services. The first step let's talk about protecting VMs using authentication and access control first. So the first step in protecting your virtual machines is to ensure that only authorized users can set up new VMs and access them as well. And you can use stuff like as your policy, to do that. And this is going to allow you to establish those sort of conventions for resources in your organization and create sort of customized policies as well. And you can apply these to sort of resources, such as, user groups or security groups, and VMs that belong to a resource group inherit these policies as well. Then we've got using multiple VMs for sort of better availability. So this is sort of high availability within Microsoft Cloud. If your VM runs sort of critical applications like web services, etc., that needs to have high availability. And Microsoft strongly recommend that you use multiple sort of virtual machines for that. So for availability, you can use availability sets, for example, or availability zones as well. And an availability set, just to talk about the difference there, an availability set is a logical grouping you can use in Azure to ensure that VM resources you place within it are sort of isolated from each other when they're deployed into an Azure data center. And Azure then ensures that the VMs you place in that availability set run across multiple physical servers, compute racks, storage units, and sort of network switches. If a hardware or sort of Azure software failure does occur, only a subset of your VMs are going to be affected, and your overall application is going to continue to be available for your customers. And availability sets are sort of essential capability when you want to build reliable cloud solutions. We'll talk about now protecting against malware. So you should install anti-malware protection to sort of help identify and remove viruses, spyware, and other sort of malicious software. And you can install the Microsoft anti-malware extension. This is, or you can do sort of Microsoft partner endpoint protection solutions as well. Trend Micro is a good example of that. Broadcom have one, and McAfee. And then you've got Windows Defender, obviously, which is the sort of native one as well. And then you've got System Center endpoint protection as well that you can use. Let's talk a little bit about managing VM updates now. Very, very important. So Azure VMs, like on-premises VMs, essentially are meant to be user managed. Azure doesn't push Windows updates to them, so you need to manage it as a consumer. And you can use things like update management within Azure. This is a solution in Azure Automation as well to manage sort of operating system updates for your Windows or Linux computers or servers that are deployed into Azure and in on-premises environments or other cloud providers. You quickly assess the status of available updates on all agent computers and manage the process of installing required updates for servers deployed in Azure and on-premises, as we mentioned, and other third-party providers. Talk a bit about managing your VM security posture now. So cyber threats are evolving every day, really. And safeguarding your VMs requires a sort of monitoring capability that can quickly detect threats, prevent unauthorized access to your resources, trigger alerts, and reduce sort of what we call false positives. To monitor security posture for your sort of Windows VMs, you can use Security Center or basically Defender for Cloud. And for Linux ones as well, you can use Microsoft Defender for Cloud as well. Let's talk about monitoring VM performance now. So resource abuse can be a problem when VM processes consume more resources than they should. Performance issues with a VM can lead to service disruption as well. And this can violate the security principle of availability. This is particularly important for VMs that are hosting like web services because the high CPU or sort of memory usage is going to indicate maybe a DDoS or denial of service attack. It's imperative to monitor VM sort of access, not only reactively while an issue is occurring, but also proactively against sort of baseline performance as measured during the normal operation. Talk a little bit now about encrypting your hardware, encrypting your virtual disks, should I say. Microsoft recommend that you encrypt virtual hard disks to help protect your sort of boot volume and your data volumes at rest in storage, along with your encryption keys and secrets as well. There's ADE or Azure Disk Encryption that you can use for this is for sort of Linux VMs, and you can use it for Windows VMs as well. You can use BitLocker as well. And the features of Windows, these are all kind of features of Windows to provide sort of volume encryption for OS and data disks. And the solution is integrated with Azure Key Vault. So this is going to help you control and manage those disk encryption keys and secrets in your sort of Vault subscription. Also ensures that all data on sort of virtual machine disks are encrypted at rest in Azure. So let's now talk a little bit about PaaS security, and then we will move on into the demo. So talk about adopting policies of identity as sort of a primary security perimeter first. One of the 5 essential characteristics of sort of cloud computing is sort of broad network access, which makes network-centric thinking less relevant, really. The goal of much of cloud computing is to allow users to access resources regardless of location. And for most users, their location is going to be somewhere on the internet, essentially. And as we've already spoken about, identity is that sort of new security perimeter. Security becomes less about sort of defending your network and more about defending your data, as well as sort of managing security of apps and users. And the key difference is that you want to kind of push security closer to what's important to your company. Initially, Azure PaaS services, an example, web roles, Azure SQL, these provide little or no traditional network perimeter defenses. It's understood that element purposes was to sort of the elements of these purposes were exposed to the internet, and the authentication provides that new perimeter, as we mentioned. Modern security practices assume that the adversary has breached the network, so always assuming breach. Therefore, modern defense practices have moved to identity. Organizations must establish an identity-based security perimeter with strong authentication, authorization, hygienes, so like best practices. Principles and patterns for network perimeter have been available for decades now. In contrast, the industry is relatively less experienced with using identity as the primary security perimeter. With that said, there are sort of accumulated enough experience to provide some general recommendations that are proven in the field and to apply, to almost all PaaS services. First is that we can talk about developing an Azure app service. So app service is a PaaS offering that lets you create web and mobile apps for any platform or device and connect to data anywhere in the cloud or on premises. App services include the web and mobile capabilities that were previously delivered separately under Azure websites and Azure mobile services. Also includes new capabilities for automating processes for hosting cloud APIs. As a single integrated service, app service brings a lot of rich set of capabilities to web, mobile, and integration scenarios. We then have the more traditional Azure cloud services. So this is an example of a PaaS. Like an Azure app service, this sort of technology is designed to support applications that are scalable, reliable, and inexpensive to operate. In the same way that app service is hosted on a VM, so too is Azure cloud services. However, you have more control over the VMs. You can install your own software on the VMs that use Azure cloud services, where you can't for app services. Let's talk a little bit about installing a web application firewall. So increasingly, web application are targets for malicious attacks and exploits common known vulnerabilities. Common among these exploits is such things like SQL injection attacks and cross-site scripting attacks, to sort of name just a few. Preventing such attacks in an application code can be challenging and may sort of require rigorous maintenance, patching, and sort of monitoring that many layers of application topology. So an example of a web application is the web application file, the WAF, and this provides centralized protection to your web applications from common exploits and vulnerabilities. We mentioned DDoS protection already, and Azure DDoS protection standard, and there's another one for networking specifically. Kind of give you so these combine sort of application design best practices, and they provide enhanced sort of DDoS mitigation features, and they give more defense against DDoS attacks. And then we need to talk about monitoring performance of applications as well. So monitoring is the act of obviously collecting and analyzing data to determine the performance, health, and availability of your application. An effective monitoring strategy is going to help you understand detailed operations of the different components of your application. And it helps you increase that uptime by notifying you of all sort of critical issues so that you can resolve them before they become problems. We then have validating security defenses, and this is an important part of testing and testing the functionality. And you can make sort of penetration testing a standard part of your build and deployment process. You can schedule regular sort of security tests and vulnerability scanning of deployed applications and monitor for open port attacks as well. Okay, so now let's move into the demo. I want to go back into Vendor for Cloud. There's a couple of the sort of identity. We talked about identity as perimeters. So a couple of the sort of regulatory compliance requirements I want to show that we can do to kind of secure your environment. So please join me in the demo. We're in the demo portal again, and I actually want to go to cloud security. I want to go to regulatory compliance. And specifically, I want to look at the Microsoft Cloud Security Benchmark. And we're going to look at specifically identity management. I want to look at the actual identity sort of compliance controls that we can do. So to again help us with that sort of concept of identity as a new perimeter. So first of all, we've got making sure you use centralized identity and authentication systems. So this includes things like storage accounts should prevent shared access. SQL Server should have sort of Entra administrator provisioned. Azure SQL Database should have Azure AD, but it's Entra only authenticated enabled. So we don't use local authentication. VPN gateways as well, if you have any of those, they should only use Entra authentication for point to point. And then Azure SQL managed instances should also only have Entra only authentication. We've then got protecting identity and authentication systems. So again, I've not got anything for Microsoft in here. It's all AWS. But here I've got for Azure, we've got manage application identity securely and automatically. So the control details here, if we look at these in a bit more detail. So again, this is IAM3 for identity. And the actions are, manage identity should be using function apps, manage identity should be using web apps, and virtual machine guest configuration extension should be deployed with system assigned managed identity. So very much around managed identities and using those. And these are just, again, just going through some things, some technical things we should really do to help with that whole perimeters and identities and new perimeter. And then we've got IAM4, which is authenticate server and services. So again, if you've got, APIs, Azure SQL databases, again, so these are IaaS and PaaS services, putting in things like API endpoints in Azure API management should be authenticated. Azure SQL database should be running TLS version 1.2, and API management calls for API backend should be authenticated as well. So again, it's going to help you with that whole identity as a new perimeter. Again, using single sign-on, I'm not got anything for Azure in there, but here we do using strong authentication controls, so making sure any accounts with write permissions on Azure resources should be MFA enabled. Anything with read permissions should have it MFA enabled. Any owner permissions, again, MFA, and authentication to Linux should use SSH keys. So these are all things that are going to help us have that sort of, that whole emphasis around identity being a new perimeter. Restrict resources based on conditions, restrict the exposure of credentials and secrets, and then secure user access to existing applications. So I just want to show you an example of some of the Microsoft Cloud security benchmarks that you need to really do. They're going to help you with that whole concept. So hopefully, again, this is not a lab to help you with the exam, although it is to help you with the exam, but it's more case studies. So in the description, there's a link to the GitHub repository, which I suggest you use and go through those case studies. There's also a link to a practice exam, a measured up discounted practice exam. I strongly recommend that as well, because again, you need to practice questions and measure up how the official partner. There's also a link to the Microsoft Learn as well. So hopefully they'll all help you with your preparation. This is obviously we've got one more episode in topic 12, which we'll do next. So thank you for joining me. Until next time, goodbye.